Hello and welcome to the Concept Spectrum podcast. I'm Utkarsh, and in this episode, we are going to talk about sustainability, how businesses adopt this concept, and their strategies behind it. So, this as a term, it is probably one of the most frequently used term in any executive or investor meetings. But in simpler words, so sustainability is how to use your natural resources or to avoid the depletion of them to maintain the ecological balance. So, in this episode, we'll talk about sustainability as a strategy in businesses and corporations, some interesting facts on the survey, and the business practices done by the traditional companies, the tech companies, and what are the steps they are taking to be sustainable. And at the end, we'll talk about the challenges to adopt these strategies and what is the future for it. So to talk about it, I'm joined by Sanjay, who is in construction industry, and Vikram, who is in tech industry. Hello guys.
Hello.
Hey Utkarsh. Hey guys, welcome to the podcast.
Welcome. So it is cool that we have two people with different industries because we'll get two different perspectives of what is sustainability to them, how they perceive it, and what are the practices their industry is taking to being sustainable. So guys, if we talk about the current business scenario, I see that sustainability is defined by two different meanings. One is they see that sustainability is the effects of businesses on the environment, and second is the effects of businesses on the society. And that is why you see there is a whole different business stream called CSR, which is corporate social responsibility. So it makes sure that your business practices enrich this idea of sustainability. So if we go deep, there's one interesting fact I would like to share with you guys. So according to the IMD Business School based in Switzerland, they did their research and survey. And out of all the executives that took part in the survey, 62% of them say that the sustainability strategy is necessary to be competitive and have a competitive advantage.
Oh.
But 84% of them say that it is important for the future. So according to the most of the executives, it's important to have this strategy for the future to have a long-term gain rather than short-term. And it is very interesting to know what is your industry stand on it. So if we start with the traditional companies like construction and manufacturing, I would like to know that even though they are the biggest industries responsible for the environmental pollutions, how they are dealing with it. What are their practices?
Yeah, sure. So let me start, as you started with the trivia, let me start with one more trivia. So if cement industry were a country, it would have been the third largest emitter of carbon dioxide in the world. So that's how big construction industry is when it comes to carbon footprint and carbon dioxide emission. So like per data in 2016, I would say world cement production generated around 2.2 billion tons of CO2, equivalent to 8% of like global CO2 emission. So if you look at Utkarsh, if you look at the total emission and like sustainability, it's a very big part of our industry. We have been working towards reducing our own carbon footprints, whether it's in materials or it's in the process of construction, or it is after, like once a building is built and in the operations of the buildings. So when it comes to, for example, you talk about materials, we are looking for materials, especially as I've talked about cement, we're looking for materials which generate low carbon dioxide, or for replacing cement, or even replacing in concrete. We have steel and cement. So we're looking for in some ways we are looking for replacement of steel. For example, we're looking for fibers. That's something new. Even I have my own research on that basis while I was doing my master's, where you can just replace the steel because the carbon emission to steel is huge. So they are looking for replacement of steel by fibers like polymer materials or even some small steel fibers, which could reduce the CO2 emission of the whole concrete process a lot.
So they will have the same those attributes that steel has, being strong and
Yeah, so that's the research we are going on. But recently in Germany, if I'm not wrong, they just constructed a whole building with fibers. Fibers act pretty well when it comes to their response in earthquakes. So that's one of the points. But we also have LEED certification. So LEED certification, I don't know whether you have observed, it's actually in India as well, where you have LEED certified buildings, where you have different factors, and that's where you're part of as a competition. So now you can consider a LEED certified building as a competition kind of stuff, where you are having structures and they are making that either whether they are LEED certified or not. So it basically counts for all the three factors: materials you are using, the operation of the building. So during the construction, how much material saving or CO2 emission or carbon footprints or even water, because as these are all parts of sustainability. And after the construction, how the building is acting. For example, you have AC systems, you have temperature controlled in the building. So what material you're using so that the temperature inside the building is cooler and you're not using much of the AC. So building as a whole ecosystem, you have to make sure that it's not having a huge carbon footprint. Even with water, are you recycling the same water and using it back? So you have water treatment plants inside the buildings which recycle it. So you have these LEED certifications.
Is it a government regulated certification?
Yeah. So it's a green building certification program. Actually it's used worldwide. So even in India, if you go back to India, you will see many buildings LEED certified. Like now it's a new trend where they're trying to certify the building through LEED, because it's like a whole ecosystem where you have to take care while through its construction, to its operation, and even after that. For example, if you now want to demolish the building, you could actually reuse those materials. That's also part. So you're not literally extracting new material. So yeah, as a whole, I would say construction industry is working in all these areas.
So if we focus on the products of your industry, so it is becoming more and more trying to recycle the materials used and how to be sustainable. But if we look at the strategies in your corporations, is it now very important to have a sustainable tag in your business strategy to be competitive?
Yes. So big firms across in the world are trying to, they're trying to push more on sustainability. Every design like this essentially starts from the design phase, where you start looking for materials, and even it's basically start with the design phase where you start looking for materials which are sustainable, right? And then you go on to the operation. You have HVAC designs where all your systems are designed. So yeah, as a whole, I would say they have already moved for a long back, I would say, but now they're pushing more on, as you said, on the competition side of that, and also as the future side of the building.
Yeah. So if we go from the most obvious culprits of the carbon footprint to one of the most dark horses, I would say, the tech companies. So actually, if we look at the tech companies, we don't say that these are the companies which are one of the biggest culprits of the pollution, but it turns out that they also consume a lot of energy. So I would like to know that from IT and tech companies, what are they doing and what are the interesting products that are actually enhancing the sustainability environment?
So, as a person, when I was introduced to carbon footprint concept, I never considered things. So when you say personal carbon footprint, your mind immediately goes to your car, your electricity bill, your other ways wherein you are maybe using conventional energy resources. But a lot of people actually don't realize that even services like internet or just your electronic devices can contribute to a large portion of your personal carbon footprint. Just take Google search, for example. Every second there are 40,000 Google searches going on. Now, as a person, I would have
Yes.
never thought about just my Google search or my internet usage maybe affecting the carbon footprint or carbon emissions that I'm responsible for as a person. But if you look at it, these services, the internet is basically run by data centers. The data centers are where all the data is stored, processed, and surprisingly, all the data centers globally are responsible for 3% energy consumption of the entire energy produced globally. So 3% might not sound like a big portion of the energy consumption, but think about this. The average electricity cost or energy cost of a data center is around $1.5 billion per year. When you look at this number and look at the numbers of carbon dioxide emissions, the carbon dioxide emissions are around 300 million metric tons. That's a lot of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. If you think about how basically these things are operating, a lot of the carbon dioxide emission that comes from the internet or the tech industry as a whole are basically data centers, the transport layer, the network, the devices, and the manufacturing process. So, but that's something that we don't realize because it's a very invisible part of our life.
Yeah, it is not very obvious to see. If you don't see any fumes or smokes coming out of data centers, you don't attach it to the polluting the environment.
Oh yeah.
Exactly.
And nowadays, what we see that even the new startups, even in be it in Silicon Valley or even in India, they are very much focused on introducing products which are sustainable and which are achieving the carbon neutral life cycle in their product management. And it is very interesting to know what are those kinds of products uh, that they are producing, which can actually make it really interesting to reduce the carbon emissions. Is there any particular example of any product or any company which is doing really good in your industries?
So I think one of the biggest factors that might affect the carbon footprint in the IT industry is the tech giants that have the highest number of data centers. Like, for example, Google. Google owns 17 data centers globally. And if you look at how they manage their energy consumption is they have literally purchased like 2.5 gigawatt of renewable energy produced. They have also turned to more efficient heat dissipation processes, and how the basic process of cooling a data center is basically what is adding into your carbon emissions and your electricity costs. So a lot of data centers all over the world actually use, of course, water cooling, and the way they try to achieve sustainability is this water is not like a freshwater resource. They are basically reusing water from a sewage treatment plant, or basically water that is already not suitable for drinking, but then it can also be reused for some other purpose.
Yeah, as a sustainability, even I would say there are various factors. I would say, like even if you talk about in construction industry, like you will be like shocked, but even paints which you use on the walls play a very high important role in maintaining temperature and your carbon footprints. So even that industry is now competing and bringing out new products. Some coating on the wall or some coating on the glass, like you have this glass facade over the buildings, so that the even if the temperature inside could be controlled through those paints, and that could eventually reduce in the energy consumption through the your AC units or HVAC units in the buildings, and that could eventually reduce your carbon footprint.
But what I see is, after researching on this, that most of the companies, so it's very important to have sustainability as your strategy in companies' growth practices. But another trivia, the trivia time. The McKinsey did a survey, and according to
Yeah.
them, 36% of the executives, they say that the main reason to have this sustainability, adopt these practices, is to have more or better corporate reputation or brand reputation. Because most of the time, because of the focus that media or government put on the companies, for them it is more important to have a brand reputation better than what consumers are perceiving. And that is why business to business companies are likelier to adopt this growth strategy than business to customer B2C companies. It could be because the investors, the media, or the government are bigger shareholders on this idea than a consumer, because most of the time consumers are price sensitive. So even if you go to
Yeah.
a supermarket, and I'm sure that you also have experienced this, that if you go to a supermarket, there is a whole different section of bio products or eco-friendly products, and you don't see a lot of people hanging around those sections, even
Yeah.
though the products are very much similar to the family of the products, but people prefer generally to stay in what they usually use. and
Is
and
the I would say it's a similar comparison of going through normal section and the organic food section,
yes,
where in the organic food section you things are expensive there, but they are of better quality. But you'll see less people around there because of the cost thing. Yeah.
but this is one of the biggest challenges to have such a products which can be comparable to what we normally use and have the same results.
Okay, I have a question actually for both of you. I was thinking how different, for example, now we talk about implementing these products and using these products, especially in any industries, I would say, in a developed versus a developing country. According to me, it is more challenging to apply that in a developing country, because in a developing country, it's more focused towards satisfying the basic needs rather than focusing on environment as a whole.
I would say a lot of this is affected by consumer demand. So basically, in a developing country wherein the consumer might be price sensitive, the optimization or the carbon footprint reduction has to be done at manufacturing level. And a country wherein the user or the end consumer is more aware about what kind of products they want, I think the number of levels wherein you can optimize your carbon emissions is has more opportunity than developing countries. But to be honest, we actually see a different kind of trend wherein an average person in the United States produces like 16.5 tons of carbon dioxide per year, as compared to 4 to 6 tons per year globally. So it kind of depends on the consumer demand of for a particular kind of products.
I would say also, I
Okay.
would like to add one more point, that it's very important for the government to be uh, to help on these issues, and to also have those regulations to enable the companies to have those sustainable businesses thriving in the environment. So even though if it's a developing country or if it's even a poor country, the government's help is one of the biggest factors for the companies to actually introduce those products, apart from, yes, the sensitive, price sensitive consumers.
You definitely need government support for people to adopt to renewable sources and sustainable energy production mechanisms. But I would also like to point out that in United States, if you actually want to go solar, you have federal tax credits, state tax credits, which actually help people to adopt these new technologies, for whom otherwise these technologies will actually be very expensive. Like for example, as of 2019, the reimbursement on your or the tax credit you got on your solar installation was like 30%. It's going down in 2020 to 23%, and all the way down to 21% in the 2021. But I think when like government bodies supporting these projects, I would say it has a bigger impact.
Yep, I totally agree with those points. And the problem with the sustainability and adopting it is to maintain the balance between doing good, which is for the environment and society, and doing well, which is the financially and economically what your company is doing. So there are a lot of challenges to adopt this strategy. One very important challenge that I see is that there is no clear definition of sustainability in corporate environment. Some people say, or some executives believe, that it is the management of issues related to environment. For some, it is management of governance issues, so relying only on the regulations and complying with them. And for some, it's the management of social issues, so the working conditions of employees and laborers. Also, there is a high risk and low financial reward. So as we saw earlier in the data, that most of the executives, they prefer having sustainable strategy for the future compared to short-term needs, because there is not a lot of returns on their investment on short terms. But yes, in for long terms, they see that it is very important. And there is one term in business where we use Porter's 5 forces. So one of the force is the threat of substitutes. So as we mentioned, that even in the supermarkets, the bio products or the organic products, they can act as a substitute, but they are still not at the level where they can be as effective as the other traditional products. And one thing that I have seen which is growing a lot, which is greenwashing. So it's a term which is used by marketing teams to mislead consumers into thinking that the products are more eco-friendly than in the reality. So I can give you an example of fashion industry. So let's say that if you have, and a lot of companies are doing this, that if you go to a fashion brand shop and you pick up a dress and you see in the tag it shows 100% recyclable, right? You have seen
Yeah.
a lot of tags
Yeah,
like
I've seen that.
So in reality, it's not the cloth which is 100% recyclable, but it's the tag itself which is 100% recyclable, not the clothes.
Oh.
So this is how, but the consumers think that they are doing something for the environment. In reality, it's that 5 centimeter square area which is 100% recyclable, not the dress. So that's how they use these terms to make you believe that they are doing something good. But in reality, it's not that easy. So what I believe is that the time, because it is for the future and for our own planet and for our own environment, sustainability will be effective only when it will be intrinsic and it will be integral part to success of any corporation. So when it will become one of the key factors of success, because right now it is not. If you see the biggest industries, they do not have sustainability as one of their key strategies. Once that becomes, then I think that we will be closer to being eco-friendly and producing sustainable products. To end it, we talked a lot about this topic, and for a lot of companies this is new. They are still figuring out how to do it, but I can see optimistic future, and will hope that everything will be as good as it was before the industrialization. So thank you guys for listening to our podcast, and we'll see you next time. And don't forget to share and like this podcast. And thank you, Sanjay and Vikram, for joining our podcast and giving your own perspective.
Thank you.
Also, guys, if you want to listen to different kind of topics from us, please suggest.